And today we have two extraordinary filmmakers, Adam and Xavier, and the film is called City on the Hill. And I have them both online here to talk about this rather extraordinary, disturbing, and often enlightening documentary called City on the Hill, all about San Francisco. So I want to welcome Adam. You're there, Adam?
I am. Yep.
And Xavier.
Absolutely. Hi, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me and to discuss your film. One thing I'm going to ask you to do, because I know you're in the same room on the same microphone, and when you do speak, just sort of as often as possible identify yourself, because otherwise there's no strong distinction between your voices. That would be very helpful. So first thing is, I've watched the film a couple of times, and I can tell you one thing is, watching City on the Hill the second time, it becomes more powerful, more enlightening, and more disturbing. So it has an energy to it, because I think my first time watching it, I'm being introduced by your beautiful film to San Francisco from a unique perspective, and which we'll get into in a moment. But I just want to congratulate you and ask you, the two of you, the first thing is, what inspired you to do this? And throw in as much of you can your background and history of working together. I'm curious about that. But more specifically about this film, what intrigued you, inspired you, prompted you to want to make a film about San Francisco, about the economic and inequity, imbalance that's going on there, homelessness, tech surge, and all of that. And I'm letting the listeners know a little bit of what it's about. So I turn it over to you. What inspired you?
Yeah, so this is Adam. It sort of materialized very quickly. It started actually as a discussion that we were having. Just our CEO and owner wanted to do a story. He had seen that homeless people in San Francisco were defecating on the street, and he thought that was just such a crazy phenomenon that was taking place out there. And Xavier and I both sort of put our heads together, and we started expanding on that idea a little bit of that's obviously a very visually captivating idea of going out and shooting people defecating on the street, but there's obviously a very much deeper problem that is causing something like that to happen. And so Xavier and I sort of put our heads together, and after some research and just talking to some people and just from our own knowledge, I guess, of the infrastructure out there, that's basically what is causing a lot of it is the homelessness problem. And in San Francisco, they actually have a lot of like the public restaurants and stores that have bathrooms. They will not allow homeless people for obvious reasons, to enter the store to use their bathrooms. So if you don't have a house and you can't use a public restroom, there's nowhere for you to go. And they wind up going, right there on the sidewalk. And it's, I mean, as you mentioned, Mark, it's obviously a very disturbing phenomenon that's happening out there, but it's just, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. And there's such a deeper rooted issue that's taking place out there. That's at the root of why that's happening in the first place. So that's sort of where it all got started. And then, we both have seen, there's an HBO special, San Francisco 2.0, I think, was it Nancy Pelosi's daughter that did it? Yeah. And that documentary is probably about 10 or 12 years old now. And, the story is fantastic. But, the shooting is basically done all by one person. It's all pretty much point of view, cell phone footage. And, we wanted to do something that that incorporated more of a cinematic tone to it.
Right.
So yeah, that's
Great,
really where the
great.
inspiration came.
And the cinematic tone I want to get to later. That's because that's a big Adam, that's your work as the DP, I'm assuming. I want to talk about that later, but I want to stick with this. A little background about me, just so you know. I mean, my whole focus in filmmaking and working with other directors, 95% of it is all narrative film, the film and television and stuff like that, and very little on documentary. So I'm fascinated by documentary. It's not my area of expertise. So I'm really fascinated about how any documentary filmmaker goes about creating, exploring, and putting together something that's basically unscripted. So I'm curious that in the preparation that the two of you were doing, you talked just a little bit about it. First of all, you've got some amazing people in your film that you've found and interviewed, whether it's Miguel Bustros or the Reverend Brown or Ben Carson himself, or who was once running for president. And anyway, but as you approach doing this film, and you're doing a film about an entire city, and yes, it's heavily focused on the homelessness situation and problem and the inequity, economic inequity, and all that. But how do you begin to find or decide who you're even looking for, or who do you discover that you want to include in your film?
Sure. So, Mark, Xavier here.
Yeah.
To kind of just backtrack a little bit more about Adam and I's backstory we've worked together on and off on a number of projects over the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. We both have a history in broadcast television.
Okay.
And working for the country's largest minority-owned broadcast TV group, Howard Stark Holdings, we are constantly doing short, quick turnaround news stories. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a half an hour or 60-minute TV show or episode, it's always like a quick turnaround. So This opportunity of going up to San Francisco, we saw kind of like the huge opportunity in kind of doing a deeper dive or deeper rooted story, kind of as Adam alluded to, in the infamous poop crisis and really tracking the root of that. Mm-hmm. And I think I would say as far as like identifying or locating, some of the people that we interviewed in the months of pre-production, we were really blessed in having connections to Secretary Carson. So kind of like reaching out to HUD and having their local office put us in touch with Miguel, for instance, was a huge blessing to the mm-hmm. project. Amos Brown was a godsend as well. Yep. Just coming across him. I actually wish in our first call with him, in our pre-production call, I joke around with him to this day that I really wish that I was recording that and I had camera set up then and there, because his story was just so riveting, mm-hmm. just about his personal history, moving west after seeing a lot of the injustices during the civil rights era. So, though I think the three of them, obviously they anchor the film, and it's just really a blessing to have them be able to join the project.
Great. And now, before you launched into even the preparation, did you know about Miracle Messages, or is that a discovery?
That was a discovery.
Let me just, I'm sorry to stop you, just for our listeners. Miracle Messages is an organization in San Francisco, as best as I can understand, that is focused on the homeless and helping to, as best they can, reunite the homeless with family and friends. Is that pretty accurate?
Spot on.
Okay.
Spot on.
Okay, so how did you discover them?
We our CEO has ties and kind of like played middleman and introduced us to a guy named by the name of Kevin Adler. He's actually the founder of Miracle Messages. And Kevin was actually out of town while we were out there. So his number 2, Jessica, joined us. And I mean, you saw the piece. So she did an excellent job.
Yep, you did.
They had a number of excellent quotes.
So, and as I watch the film, especially the second time, and this is a compliment, totally a compliment, because you've got about 4 films in here, 4 documentary. I mean, you could do an entire documentary just about Miracle Messages, and just anyway, it feels so rich in so many areas that. Every time you leave one area and move on to another, like from Miracle Messages to the tech invasion, I go, oh no, I want to stay there. Then you get in the tech invasion. Okay, no, I want to stay here. So it's so rich. So now let me ask you, as you're going into actually shooting this film, I'm assuming you've done a lot of prep. You've talked to a lot of people. I love the story about the missed footage and missed moments with Reverend Brown. I know that feeling, and some of the stuff that I've done that's more documentary-like, you go, we should have shot that, but then it's gone. Yeah. What was your process actually going into production? How long were you there? How did you schedule everything you're doing? How are you? What was your production process like?
So Adam here again. Yes, so we were in San Francisco for about a week. Maybe it might have been like 8 days, maybe. And honestly, even a couple of those days actually were not good shoot days because it was not the greatest weather. We were out there, so that was a little bit of a challenge, but yeah, I mean, we had Xavier did a fantastic job of booking these awesome interviewees and scheduling them, and then in between those, we pretty much just sort of put on our walking shoes and kind of hit the city and had our cameras with us the whole time basically, and we were pretty much just running and gunning the entire time, and just anytime we saw something that was interesting or that we thought would be a cool shot, or just anything we thought might be relevant to the film, we were able to sort of just shoot. We did have a couple. I mean, we made sure that we hit a couple of key spots that we wanted to hit, and. Yeah, so we made sure to plan those, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it sort of materialized pretty quickly. I mean, you mentioned we went from the film does kind of jump around a lot, and yeah, it's because it was a very hard film to storyboard for, honestly, because a lot of it was just so organic, and it just like sort of materialized on its own, and we didn't really know what we got until we actually got it into the computer and started watching it and editing it. Yeah, it was definitely a fun project to work on because of that. But
yeah, Mark, Xavier, I think that anytime, or let me start this way. I think the ideal situation for any film project or documentary, more specifically, is to have more than 8 days of shoot time.
Thank you, because I was, I was going to say, wait a minute, you did this in 8 days? I'm impressed, but go ahead, Xavier, keep going.
Yeah, so the fact of we had these 2.5 months of pre-production, and when you get there, no matter how long you plan for something,
never goes
it never goes according to plan. So we had to end up rescheduling two of the interviews, and One of the people that we had lined up in the tech community actually canceled on us like super last minute. And, you know, it's frustrating when you're out there, and just the fact that we were able to kind of get a couple of those man on the street interviews, like really not just save the day, but like added a great level of composure to the overall project. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we were able to do that in 8 days was just like amazing. Everything just came together. And, you know, we had our interview shoot days, and then we had our days just for B-roll where I had to pick up the camera too, and kind of get some supplementary shots. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was just a fun time. And, you know, I ended up having the best tacos of my life down there in the Mission District. It was a blast.
That's one of your fondest memories of the best tacos of your life?
Absolutely.
They were good. They were very good tacos.
That's great. Well, obviously, I mean, it's wonderful meeting you guys, because obviously what you explained to me about the work you do, and that you will go out and shoot something very, very quickly and get it done you're used to working fast. And so when you said, you know, you're going to San Francisco and you had more time, I was thinking, okay, you know, 3-4 weeks or something like that. And when you say 8 days, I go, that's fast for me. I'm doubly impressed. So I'm curious, you know, with the interviews. Well, I just want to talk about the interviews for a second. Then I want to talk about the stuff that you captured on the streets. Were there, besides people canceling and things like that, what were the biggest challenges you faced, or the biggest sort of gifts you got doing these interviews?
Interesting. Great question. I think that the biggest gifts were the fact that, you know, once we're set up, we're rolling. So even if we're mid conversation or taking a break and just having like a chat, we were still capturing like a lot of those reaction moments, a lot of those times where, like, for instance, Miguel or even Amos Reverend Brown mm-hmm. would, you know, kind of just leave you with this phenomenal quote that, you know, kind of like could be used to like wrap the entire project. Like he has multiple just great, energetic and charismatic quotes. That's just the energy that he, you know, kind of conveys.
Right.
And just having that like kind of just naturally manifest itself was like kind of a blessing for me as like the interviewer, because it was just like, all right, you know, I don't have to like force the energy or the charisma to come out of you. It's just naturally exuding, which isn't always the case. So that was definitely a blessing. I think some of the challenges were obviously, aside from cancellations, the fact that we were staying like on the other side of the, I guess not the valley, but the hill.
Yeah, not even within the city limits technically of San Francisco. So we Ubered in from where we were staying about like a half an hour pretty much every day to get into the city.
Yep.
Yeah,
that proved to be a little difficult.
Yeah, and bringing, you know, we've got two, or no, I guess we had 3, sometimes 4 cameras, including the drone, plus a Movi stabilizer unit, and we've got these giant Pelican cases, and it's just the 2 of us, and
wow,
you know, we look like we're homeless ourselves because of all the we have, and yeah, so you know, hauling around all that gear all day in the middle of July was definitely a challenge. I know, for not to cut Xavier off, but for me personally, what I think probably the biggest challenge for me was actually during Amos's interview. So we shot him in. He's the pastor of the Third Baptist Church in San Francisco,
right? And
we shot him in the sanctuary of the church,
uh-huh.
and this was sort of just an overlooked detail by the 2 of us that we probably should have seen coming. But so the sanctuary's got a lot of stained glass in there, and so we shot that interview. I want to say it was like maybe 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It was definitely later in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And so the sun was sort of dipping in and out of the clouds, and the way that it was hitting the stained glass window, it was totally like screwing with the lighting for the interview. So like, you know, Xavier's doing a fantastic job conducting this interview, and you know, Dr. Brown is giving these amazing answers, and I'm sitting there having to iris up or iris down like every 30 or 45 seconds because the lighting is changing.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Wow. And then even that wasn't enough. I actually had quite a bit of post-production and color correcting and color grading just to make it look even. But that was probably the biggest, as far as shooting is concerned, that was probably my biggest challenge. That, and there was also during Jessica's interview, there was a homeless woman that was just screaming at the top of her lungs for some random reason. And so we shot her outside. And so there were a couple of audio issues that we had there, but fortunately we were able to navigate around it for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are, from a technical standpoint, at least, those were some of the bigger challenges that we faced.
Yeah, I have this in my head at the moment, Adam. I have this image of you with all the Pelican cases and all these beautiful, expensive cameras and drones and all of that, pushing them around in a shopping cart.
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, yeah, it was. And San Francisco is, you know, it's a city literally built on a hill. So
yeah,
it's not like you're walking on flat ground or anything. You're getting a good workout in when you're carrying the equipment, you know.
Great. So now, you mentioned the homeless people yelling and stuff like that, because one of my other questions was, and I'm always curious about with documentaries, when you're shooting on the streets and it's not an official shoot. When I mean official, like, you know, when we're doing it, we got permits and all that kind of, you're just out there shooting.
Sure.
And I can imagine the challenges you run into there. But what I'm really curious about in that area is that idea that that when you're shooting a documentary and you enter the world that you want to shoot in, you've automatically changed the world just by your appearance, by your arrival, because you have cameras and stuff like that. Did you? Right. Now you're trying to capture life on the streets as authentically as you can. Did you find your presence there a problem, an obstacle to what you were trying to get, or a challenge to what you were trying to capture?
Right. Yeah, it's Adam again. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, we were pretty much able to work undisturbed. I mean, you're right. Like anytime. It doesn't matter where you are. Anytime you show up with a camera that's clearly not, you know, your standard run-of-the-mill camera, it sort of puts a spotlight on you. You know, people's natural reaction is always going to be, you know, oh, what are you shooting for? Is this for the news, or, you know? And so we did have a couple of those interactions for sure, especially with, as you mentioned, some of the man on the street interviews. And honestly, we also honestly ran. I would say the bigger complication was honestly people turning us down for interviews because they didn't want to be filmed. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, as far as like the homeless people were concerned, they really could have. I mean, as far as we were concerned, I don't even think they knew we were there. I think they were just doing their thing, and you know, we tried to make sure that we were respecting their personal space and their privacy. And, you know, we don't want to be filming people that in a way that's going to shed a poor or bad light on them, obviously. So we definitely tried to keep our distance with them and be as respectful as we could. And yeah, for the most part, we were pretty undisturbed from that respect.
Great. Yeah, well, I can imagine that. I mean, the thing is, being homeless, I've never been homeless, so I don't know that world at all, but they are so visible anyway.
Yeah.
That I can imagine that you show up with a camera and it's just, they're visible, they're exposed. Let's put it that way. And
Sure.
so
Yeah.
I can imagine that they have very little reaction or very little concern about the fact that there are cameras. And of course, there are always those people who see the cameras and either, are curious or want to be filmed or don't want it, whatever it is, all that stuff you can run into.
Right.
Now, here's another question. As you're shooting, and this is again my curiosity and fascination with documentary work. You arrive in San Francisco. I'm assuming with as much of an idea of what you're going to get. So you can't storyboard this. You can barely script it, but you know the interviews you're going to do. You know sort of the subject matter you're approaching or the questions you want to ask or what you want to explore. But my question is, during those course of those 8 days, how much did that idea of the film you were making shift and change while you were shooting in your minds or in your awareness or in your discoveries?
Oh my gosh. Again, it's Adam again. I can't even count, honestly. I mean, between the number of times that it changed in post-production, the number of times it changed while we were shooting, the number of times, when we weren't shooting that we were having conversations and it changed. I mean, honestly, like so much of it was just happened spontaneously, and we were just extremely lucky that it developed the way that it did.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, our interview with Nancy, we actually didn't, we never intended or planned on using her at all. That was actually a separate interview that we were filming, that was not going to be a part of this production. And we just thought that her insight was so relevant to the conversation, and she had such a unique backstory in that her husband was an astronaut and was heavily involved with technology and everything, and she's got such a great understanding of that that we just felt compelled to put her in there. And so a lot of it did happen spontaneously, and we, again, we didn't, even after we shot it, we really didn't know what we got until we put it in the system and got to listen to the actual interviews. And even the store owners, a couple of store owners, we weren't intending on shooting interviews with them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them saw us filming right outside the store, and I think actually she was coming out to tell us to stop, believe it or not. In the storefront, and it had a very like hippie vibe to it. It kind of captured the essence of the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco. So she was actually, I'm pretty sure, coming outside to tell us like, hey, like this is private property, you can't film here. And then she wound up being one of our best interviewees. And it just, I mean, it changed. It's unrecognizable from what I think we had in mind in pre-pro to once we actually had the finished product.
Oh, it's okay. Here's an unfair question for both of you. How many days do you wish you'd had there?
Oh my gosh.
Depends. Are we getting tacos for lunch every day? Or?
You can have all the tacos you want.
Then infinite?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question. I think that if we would have had at least a solid month to kind of like rebook some of the tech interviews that we had with some of the Silicon Valley giants, that could have had a different role or effect on the project. I think if Mayor London Breed we were supposed to film her, but her office ended up like canceling last minute because of some obligations she had previously scheduled.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
If we would have had like local government officials or local council members, like there's no telling. There's no telling. But I mean, we wouldn't have the project that we have currently, and it could have gone in a completely different direction. So, you know, it could be that 8 days really was just enough for us to kind of, you know, do the trick.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if you take away those limitations of time, or as you know, in any kind of filmmaking, you take away the restrictions, the problems, the challenge, you know, even the fact that the sun will go down at a certain time of the day.
Right.
If you take it, you know, say, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Then the creativity shifts enormously. I don't think it gets better. I think it gets worse. When you have all the options available to you. So you guys working on just 8 days, I can imagine that those 8 days pushed you or challenged you in a way that it stimulated the creativity within the film. And I think you're right. It would have been a very different film if you had shot for a month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, not to cut you off. I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, pretty much as far as like a lot of the B-roll shots that we got, for the most part, we really only had like one shot at it, just because we didn't have the time really to, if it didn't go well. So for example, I shot a time lapse of the Golden Gate Bridge,
right?
And you know, I was hoping to get, you know, the fog to really like be able to move in and out. And the night that we went, it just was not a very good night for the fog. Just didn't roll in the way that it does. It's, from what I understand, it's kind of a 50-50 shot that you have.
Yep.
That you're at the right kind of fog, and we just unfortunately, you know, went on a night that the coin came up tails instead of heads.
Yep.
But yeah, so had we had more time, then we obviously would have been able to get more dynamic B-roll shots, and we would have had multiple takes to get, you know, a number of different shots that did or didn't pan out. But at the end of the day, we still felt pretty satisfied, I think, with the stuff that we were able to get.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, and the look of the film is incredible. So I'm going to ask you an unfair question, Adam. Well, no, it's a good question. It's an exposing question, because I look at the film, especially the second time, and I'm looking at a lot of the B-roll stuff and the shots you have of all over San Francisco, and the time-lapse shots and stuff like that, and they're extraordinary. And I'm thinking, did he shoot all these or did he acquire them? So that's the unfair question. Is every shot in this film done by you?
Busted. So no, okay. Not every shot. I would say we probably shot close to 75 to 80% of the entire film.
Yep.
So chances are majority of the shots that you saw were taken by us, but again, we were working on such a condensed time schedule. We just didn't have, and with that 8 days, like I mentioned earlier, I think at least two of them were rainouts, so we couldn't film at all.
Yeah.
So really, we're talking about 6 days at that point. And San Francisco is a huge city. There's a lot of areas to shoot. And we unfortunately just didn't have the time to be able to get to everywhere that we needed to go to. And then, you know, on top of that, some of the places that we wanted to shoot were, you know, fairly restricted access. You know, the tech companies aren't going to let you just roll in with your camera gear and start filming there. So that was a little bit of a challenge to try to be able to acquire some of that footage. And but yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I want to say probably 75 or 80% of the film is originally shot footage, and then we sort of had to fill in the holes where we were missing stuff, unfortunately. But
yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, being not a documentary filmmaker, a narrative filmmaker, if I have something to shoot and I've got 8 days, and the DP says, okay, well, today we're doing these B-roll shots. I'm going, Why? I've got people to interview. I've got content we got to create, you know.
Right.
And
Right.
and that channel now with a looser, larger schedule, you can schedule days like that. And
Right.
but to use some of that valuable time, and that's when you say, can't we just get screenshots? Can't we just find the shots that we need,
Right.
that are public domain, or buy some shots or whatever? So,
Right.
so
Honestly, that's a credit to Xavier's scheduling and planning, because he did a fantastic job basically of stacking interviews. So we would have, maybe 2 heavy interview days. And that allowed us to then have a couple free days where we were afforded the freedom to be able to just go out and shoot freely and not have the the time restraints of knowing that we needed to be in and out of somewhere to go get to another interview. So that was definitely a credit to him.
Yeah, which brings up another. Thank you for that. It brings up another aspect that I can imagine. I mean, I've only worked on a few documentaries, and I worked on one that we shot in Micronesia, and we had 18 days. And I know that's sounding like a luxury to you, 18 days. But it took us a month to get there. That was the problem. But but back to the point of the luxury of going out and shooting and just capturing whatever you can, whatever just happens in front of you. In other words, it's not a B-roll thing, or beauty shots of the city, and it's not a scheduled interview. Just to have the luxury to have a day or two to just let's hit the streets, let's see what we find, which is a huge part of documentary filmmaking, is just capture whatever's really going on. In other words, get outside the plan. And just see what, go to where the homeless are hanging out and talk to them. Let's just see what but with your tight schedule, there's very little room for that as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it was B-roll days where we try to just plan ourselves right in the middle of a vibrant area that we thought would be a good place to shoot. And fortunately, there was a decent amount of foot traffic. And so in between B-roll shots, we were able to snag a couple people who were willing to be nice enough to come on camera and share their thoughts for 5 minutes or whatever. And it definitely helped. That was definitely valuable information and storytelling that we got from those men on the street and spontaneous interviews that we got.
Great. Okay, I'd like to shift a little bit now just to your post-production process. You've already alluded to it a little bit about discovering what you had. When you finally got to look at what you had after the whirlwind of 8 days, and then you go home and you load it all in and watch it. Can you share with us what that process was like, both creatively in terms of discoveries and how you approach editing a documentary, and how the two of you work together?
Yes, I mean, you kind of, it's kind of you kind of feel like you're in the middle of a hurricane when you get back. You've just got so many interviews and all these memory cards, and I learned very early in my career, the hard way, unfortunately, the importance of organization. So that was pretty much, I probably spent at least maybe 2 or 3 days after we got back, just logging footage and just labeling different shots and organizing and just trying to get everything into my workflow, so that way later on in the editing process I'd be able to know exactly where I need a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge. I know exactly where that is. And then on top of that, we were able to get some of the longer interviews. I transcribed a bunch of the shorter interviews, but for Miguel's interview and Dr. Brown's interview. Some of the ones that ran a little longer, we sent those out to get transcribed.
Right.
And, so those took a couple of days, and you get everything back, and, you've got 8, 10, 12 pages worth of interviews. And then before you even get to sit down and start editing, it's just sitting down and reading them and digesting all the information. Because especially for me, when I'm shooting, I sort of get into a zone where, I'm so focused. I mentioned earlier, Dr. Brown's interview, how, I need to make sure that the iris is being adjusted for the lighting changes. And, I'm so focused on making sure the camera is working properly and the audio is working properly. I don't really get to actually listen to what the interviewees are saying. So when I get back and I start reading the transcripts, that's really my first introduction to what these people are saying. And from there, it's just, I think I cut the trailer first, actually. And then, it didn't even really mean to. I just sort of stumbled upon like the right bites, and that came together fairly quickly. And then it was just, going through, kind of just trying to separate all the topics that all of our guests spoke about into chapters, if you will. This person's talking about technology, this other person's talking about technology. You sort of separate those parts of their interviews and put them together, and then you get in a little bit more into the nitty gritty of it and try to find where things line up. And even still, I still feel like it jumps around quite a bit, but that's kind of the helter-skelter nature of the beast that comes with doing documentaries and unplanned shooting, basically.
Yeah, and the tight schedule you had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've known of documentaries where they have so many hours and hours and hours of material, you could make 2 or 3 different films, but in eight days, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, and on top of that, for the most part, it was pretty much, Xavier and I did most of the heavy lifting on it. So, a lot of big production crews have, teams of anywhere from, I'm sure you know this, Mark, like 5 to 50 people working on the same film. And so you got a lot of extra hands to help out. And, for a lot of the post-production stuff, the heavy lifting was done mostly by Xavier and I. And so, that was a bit of a challenge to have just the 2 of us with all this footage. But
so the 2 of you are doing the editing yourselves?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Which is to me is great, and also not so great. I mean, because what you miss is someone looking at the material without having known what the 8 days was like,
right?
And responding only to the material and not to the tacos and
right. Yeah, no, and it was a challenge at times too, because you spend a few months working on this, and you get, there were definitely times where I was frustrated because it's hard to pull yourself back and sort of get a bird's eye view of it. And you get so enthralled in it that you don't really get to have a fresh set of eyes to look at it and sort of give you some perspective. So there were definitely times where, I went through, some writer's blocks, if you will. Because I just, I was stuck, and it's hard to come back into it with a fresh set of eyes when you've been working on it for, 8 weeks, 10 weeks in a row. And sometimes you just get stuck, and you need that fresh set of eyes.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, my experience in going from production to, there's that whole adage that you write the script 3 times, all that. But my experience of going production into post-production is basically, my whole philosophy is once production is done, I have to totally abandon what I think I was doing. Just give it the film I thought I was, even if it's scripted, and most of my stuff is scripted. But I have to sort of give that up, and then try to, just like you're talking about, with fresh eyes, look at what I've got and discover what I have made, which may be drastically different, hopefully better or more interesting than what I thought I was making. So I'm wondering if in the post-production, what kind of discoveries there were as you're assembling, as you're going through, and thank you for all the information on the organization and the transcripts. And I know how tedious that can be, and important, but I'm curious about discoveries that you made as you're wrestling over those weeks with your material, about what you discovered that was possible, or discovered that you thought was there that maybe wasn't there.
So to give you this is Xavier, by the way, Mark.
Yep.
But to give you some additional background, throughout our entire post-production process, those months that it took us to finish, every week, not day in, day out, but every week, we are also shooting and producing a 30-minute and 1 hour TV show for our local ABC7 station here in DC. So that, just shooting that and then having to edit those kind of disrupt your workflow process, particularly when you're all right, when you're editing something, I'm sure you just want to focus on that and not be interrupted with side projects or anything like that.
Right.
And that's what it kind of felt like, but obviously our obligations are to the TV shows that we have to do, because that's our job, right? That's our source of income.
Yep.
So I wanted to mention that with regards to some of the struggles or tough encounters that we would come across. But then Adam kind of touched on when, as soon as we got back, he wanted to go through footage and everything. As soon as I got back, in my mind, all I'm thinking of are the interviews that we didn't get. So it's like, what else do we have to get? We still had 3 interviews that we shot after we got back from San Francisco. I wanted to get, Congresswoman Barbara Lee out there in Oakland, or Speaker Pelosi. And just, I wanted to get Dr. Carson, and ended up getting Carson. And then, Nancy was a godsend. She does excellent stuff with the Conrad Foundation down there in Florida. And her late husband was Pete Conrad, the third man to walk on the moon. So it's she's just super plugged into having formerly lived in San Francisco, to the tech community, and then obviously her ties to NASA. It's just in her blood.
Right.
So that kind of interview was just a blessing to kind of get, particularly after having finished shooting, the bulk of it, and just kind of Adam and I put our heads together, all right, this is what we've got. This is the footage that we have. I feel like we're still missing X component or Y component. Yeah. So, I gotta get to kind of more pre-production, back and do more pre-po during our post-production. And, I was just glad that we were able to get those interviews in DC. So we filmed 10 interviews. We didn't use all of them out in San Francisco. And then we had 3 that we did in DC, which was kind of cool. Just because that's our home base, for one, and for 2, having I suppose Dr. Carson with the Department of Housing and Urban Development being headquartered in DC kind of played into it really very nicely as well.
Yeah. Wow. And meanwhile, as you said, and thank you for telling us this, you're doing your regular job. So this film was almost made as a side job hobby while you're trying to maintain a regular job, both of you.
Absolutely. We begged for the time, just like a week or two of like undivided like resources or anything, and it would be hard. It would really be tough, especially when you're operating on a fairly low to non-existent budget. You know, most times you've got anywhere from 25 on up in available budget or resources, or like as Adam also alluded to, crew. And when it's two of you filming and you don't have the resource to essentially get music rights or the stock footage that you want, because it's that clip's too expensive, or like, you know, we had our flights and our hotels taken care of, and like that was it. There was no like actual, I guess, operating budget for the actual film, and you know, being able to pull off what we were able to in, you know, out in San Francisco, and then obviously in post, you know, kind of just opens your eyes up to like, all right, what if we had the budget? Like, what would we have been able to create? And, you know, kind of like what you spoke on earlier with, what if you had more time? What do you think the project will look like? And, you know, time is money. So, I don't know. I'm not salty. I'm just like, I can't help but think about what could have been. You know?
Well, that's a great lead into. We're coming near the end of our time, but I have a couple of more questions I want to ask you. That's a great lead into Xavier, into my next question. I know, getting back to the narrative stuff, and even the documentary footage that I've shot. You know, when I'm completing it or finishing it, I have this great urge to do something different. Not different. I have a great urge to go back into that material and explore something else. And that's what the experience of shooting that film, or especially in post-production, putting it together, I see the possibilities and I feel this urge to, God, wouldn't it be great if, not that I'm going to do it perhaps, but just that urge. So I'm sort of asking you that as you're finalizing the picture, did you have those instincts or those feelings? Like, for instance, I'll just throw out one to you, to go back and really spend more time just on the homeless situation, or just with the miracle messages people. You know, were there areas in the story, because you cover so much in this documentary, that you would love to go back if you had the time and opportunity and the financing to explore more deeply?
This is Adam.
Yeah.
So I can speak stronger, I guess, to the post-production side of that. I mean, I'm pretty anal when it comes to my edits. So, especially when I've watched things over and over again, you know, if there's something that, you know, if something could have been one frame later or should have been one frame shorter, you know, something that generally, like, you know, the general public is never going to know the difference, but to me, I see it. And there's, you know, that you're kind of Alice in Wonderland going down the rabbit hole with that, because you know, that's a very dangerous game to play if you go back and think about things that you would do differently or that you would change. Because for me, I never feel like I have a finished product. There's always something that I would go back and change, even, you know, months, years after I edit something or after I shoot something. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that quite answers your question as far as content is concerned. Xavier may have a better feel for that, just because he was more heavily involved on the production side of things. But Yeah, for me personally, I'm never truly like satisfied with any of my edits. There's always go back and change, or I would maybe move this part of the document, maybe move this part of the film later and put it next to this part because it actually made better sense to put it here. And so for those types of structural things and editing things, but Xavier can probably comment better on the production storytelling side.
So one of the, like, I guess, missed moments that I really wish that we could have spent more time doing in San Francisco, but with our time restrictions, we obviously needed to get our necessary shots as opposed to our wish list.
Yeah.
That's being parts of like the historic Fillmore district, as Amos Brown refers to as the old Harlem of the West, as well as Miguel.
Yeah.
Like I really wanted to, tell the story of like Billie Holiday and Charlie Parker or John Coltrane, doing jam sessions back in like not New York City or Chicago, but in San Francisco in the film. And the fact that is pretty much a non-existent neighborhood anymore, and the Black population's like just almost non-existent in San Francisco right now as well, with regards to residents, which is completely down from in the past. And I didn't necessarily want to go too far into like Hunter's Point or A Last Black Man in San Francisco. Like I never want to like re-emulate another film.
Yeah.
So I think that it was probably for the best, but like from a production standpoint, one of those as you were talking about, like I wish I had moments. I think that would definitely be it for me.
No, that's great. Thank you for both of those answers. And getting back to what you said, Adam, yeah, you did answer my question because both of you did. I mean, my just experience as a filmmaker, storyteller, is this what Martha Graham calls the divine dissatisfaction. That this is great. I love what we do, and I'm never happy. And what somebody else said about filmmaker, a friend of mine, also a documentary filmmaker, he says, no film is ever finished. It's only abandoned. And that feeling that it's not done. And I think that's something that we as artists have to live with, sometimes grapple with and struggle with. And sometimes I'm sure in the other work that you've alluded to that you're doing, you deal with this a lot, saying because we have to get this whatever this is we're shooting now together in so many days, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we had more time and we could really do it the way we wanted to do it, but we have a deadline. And all of those, and that's something. And even like with this film, City on the Hill, there was, as I understand, no deadline. You were just trying to get it done as quickly as you could. But even then, there's that feeling that if I could go back, if I could do something again, or as you said, Adam, if I could go back into editing again, I would change something. And it's not even shooting something else. There's 2 frames in there that I wish weren't there, or whatever it is. But that's that's what we live with. And I think the beauty of that for me, that divine dissatisfaction is what keeps us moving forward. Because we're sort of, that's the little golden nugget that we're chasing, is to have something that has pure satisfaction. Well, it's never going to happen, but we keep chasing it, and that's what keeps us alive and keeps us creative and keeps us doing what we're doing. Okay, now I have one big last question for both of you, and I want to thank both of you, Adam and Xavier, for this great interview. As you know, this podcast will be listened to by mostly filmmakers. and a lot of other people, but it's really intended for filmmakers through the work of Flick Fair and all that. So I'm really curious, as documentary filmmakers, and maybe you've worked in narrative film too as well, what advice do you have? What suggestions, what would you like to, this is your opportunity to talk to all those people who are listening to this podcast and are learning from you and are inspired from you. What would you like to share with them?
I guess for me, again, this is Adam speaking. Just to approach it with as open a mind as you possibly can, because especially with these types of projects, first off, things never seem to go as planned, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a matter of being able to adapt, and sometimes that's when you get the most beautiful, some of the most beautiful elements to your entire piece is the stuff that's not scripted, but also, kind of bringing this full circle back to the beginning of the interview, how, this story started as, we want to go out and capture these people who are going to the bathroom on the streets, basically. And it developed into something much bigger and much more powerful and much more insightful. And so, yeah, basically just, again, to approach it with as open of a mind as you possibly can, because you really don't know what direction it's going to turn in when you're dealing with these, with real people and with real stories, and with the spontaneity and the organic material that you're dealing with. You just have no idea what direction it's going to go into. So that would probably be my biggest piece of advice for this piece.
Great, thank you. Xavier?
I would say, Mark, that no matter the filmmaker, whether they're operating on $100,000 budget or $1 million budget or a non-existent budget, that that money should not be a restriction or really hold you back. And you've got to look at that as an opportunity. Look at everything that might be, preeminently considered to be a disadvantage or a constraint. Look at it and use that as an opportunity to kind of work around. And through planning ahead of time, and really put in a lot of work and effort into your pre-production, no matter if interviews might fall through, just having the kind of the comfort and the solace of knowing that, all right, cool, one or two of these might have canceled, but thank God that we've got these lined up already. It's really a savior. And then the last thing that I would say, not so much during the production, but in post-production, is really take the time to not rush to get your project out. Take a lot of time in your electronic press kit. Take time in some of your promotional and marketing materials in getting, your stills or a solid short and long synopsis, and make sure you thank everyone that was involved in the project. I think if you don't take yourself serious or your film or your project serious, then neither will any of the festivals, neither will any of the awards committees, and neither will your viewers. So that's my 2 cents, I suppose.
2 cents? That was a few grand. That's beautiful. Thank you both, and I want to thank you both for this, for taking the time to do this podcast, be part of this podcast, and I want to congratulate you both on City on the Hill, which I believe is now playing at the Flick Fair Film Festival, and it's been a real pleasure meeting both of you. My name is Mark Travis. I've been the host of this, and I want to thank both Adam and Xavier for taking the time and for making such an extraordinary film. Bless you both.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having us.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Okay, thank you. I hope to run into you guys someday somewhere, or at least see more of your work. We will stay in touch. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Mark,
Okay.
take care.
Yeah.